Hi there, I'm Jill Talbot, coming to you from Yuin Nation country in the south coast of New South Wales. And I'm very delighted to be a finalist in this year's Lester Prize 2020. So I've put together a short video that looks at some of the processes I bring to the making of a portrait that reflect on and draw upon my early training as a printmaker and a woodworker. And these include the use of monoprinting, stencil making, and carving into my birch ply backing with power tools. So I hope you find it of some use, and thank you for watching.
A self-portrait needs a selfie, so I set up a shot with automatic timing, one which could be placed within the composition and fitted with my proposed narrative. As I was working within a size 40 by 40 Perspex sheet, I printed a copy of my photograph to the desired dimensions, which I then traced basic outlines using a light box. If you don't have a light box, you can tape the photo to a window with plenty of light, and that works just as well. I then made a monoprint using block printing ink, a roller, and my Perspex sheet. After evenly rolling out the ink, you can use any colour you like. I removed the surplus ink with a sheet of newspaper and a clean, soft roller. And I then placed another sheet of paper over the ink, laid my pencil outline drawing over the top of that, and retraced all of the lines, pressing firmly. And this pressure picks up the ink from the Perspex to the underside of the litho paper. Once both papers are lifted off, the outline of my drawing remained on the Perspex. Usually the monoprint on paper is kept as the artwork and the Perspex sheet is cleaned, ready for another monoprint, but I was keen to explore using the image transferred to the Perspex as a basis for painting. And this was the process I used to transfer my image onto a sheet of Perspex. A new discovery that I was pretty excited about and really enjoyed playing with. Once I had the basic lines in place, I used oil paint to complete the work. I rubbed back quite a lot and reapplied if I wasn't happy with it. Some of the surface texture seen is leftover residue from many layers of printmaker's ink on the Perspex, as it was one of my old printing plates just lying around the studio. It was a real happy accident. This was a student's first attempt at a monoprinted self-portrait, and as you can see, a high level of accuracy is achievable just through basic tracing over the lines within your chosen photograph, and it makes it a very accessible way for people who are starting out to achieve an accurate representation of themselves or of another subject. Equipment required for monoprinting includes your backing sheet, which could be Perspex or glass, block printing ink, a colour of your choice, soft rubber rollers I find work best, pencils for tracing, and paper to print on. I like to use lithographic paper. It's really very inexpensive and perfect for the job. I've only just started recording colour recipes in my notebook recently, which I should have been doing for years, because you can remix accurate paint colours when you've made up some and it runs out. I always write the recipe components in it, and it's also useful to make colour swatches every time you mix up a colour and write the recipe on the back. and you can hold these up against a work when deciding what colour you want to choose. After a sitting with my subject to develop working drawings, I drafted the initial drawing to scale on pieces of paper taped together to the size of my finish painting. I draw the main elements of my composition on separate pieces of paper so that I can move them around the overall composition when working out where exactly I want to place them. My art training included a woodwork elective, which I draw upon when working on birch ply. I'm using a Dremel to engrave texture into the surface, which I will fill with paint. I force paint or printmaking ink into the grooves made by the Dremel and then wipe the surface back with a damp cloth. I like to move around the work as I'm painting, moving from space to space, either underpainting and filling in areas, just as I respond to each component in the work. Let your painting tell you what it needs. I often rework areas if I'm not fully happy with them, and will jump to another spot on the work if I'm not getting anywhere or I'm not enjoying it. If you don't like it, paint over it is definitely my motto. I refer constantly to the image that I am working from, drawings, photographs of my subjects. I'm aiming to observe, analyse and make changes without fear of making mistakes. Tools are so important, especially for use when painting fine facial detail. I have a small selection of my favourite brushes, which I really cherish and look after, and these include filbert, square, round and liner styles. I find it very important to develop a connection to my subject and to develop a story around the work. It's very much about investing emotion and narrative into the artwork, and I really need to feel interested in and motivated by my subject. I first met my subject Curly in 2019 after mentoring her in printmaking in my studio on the south coast of New South Wales, and we both lived through the catastrophic bushfires of last summer, which affected both of us quite severely at times. I use hand-cut paper and acetate stencils on almost every painting I do, applying paint or printmaker's ink or a mixture of both with a roller, and I keep all of my stencils to reuse them or collage them. Making a stencil is simple. I've traced my chosen shape using a light box or paper taped to a window, and then cut this out carefully with a sharp Stanley knife or scalpel. If your blade is blunt, the edges of the stencil will be blurry and you won't get a good effect. It's best to use a cutting board underneath, or you can use cardboard. So tape the stencil into place on your artwork. This process is suitable for plywood, paper, card, or any solid immovable surface. I've rolled out my ink or paint, or a mixture of both, and steadily applied the roller in one direction repeatedly over the stencil until I'm happy with the coverage. Be careful not to overshoot the edges of the stencil. Using acetate for stencils makes them very durable, and with reuse over time, they build up layers of colour and texture, becoming artworks in themselves almost. I do have a lot of them. Most of this imagery was initially laid down using stencils, which I subsequently worked into further with paint, sometimes re-stenciling over them. And I just found it a process that really lent itself to further developing and experimentation. In this painting, I hand carved a lot of the straight lines using a hand tool and a steel ruler. It was a little bit like making an etching plate in that I then pushed paint into the engraved grooves and wiped the excess paint out, which then gave me the structure to begin painting within. I also used stencils a lot in this work and collage. I find the process of tracing and cutting stencils heightens my awareness of form and shape within the composition and imbues my subjects with a more tangible sense of who they might be. It is a little like playing with paper dolls as a child. Giving myself the opportunity to move their shapes around the board and address the narrative in my head is an integral and very satisfying part of my process.